All right, A push class. It is 12:34. You guys just auto submitted or submitted your DBQs. I haven't looked at any of them. Okay, but I figured I would do a quick look at the documents, post this up there, and then I'll get to grading them. If you're curious, this DBQ was one that came to me. The man who proposed the two doc approach that I've been throwing out there some and talking to some guys about. The teacher who does that or is the big proponent of that has been printing a lot of bits about it, none of which I found to be actually that groundbreaking beyond the initial presentation he gave. But he's been making a few practice DBQs using 5 documents, and in part, he is um, he's trying to take documents from old DB. He's smashing up, right? He's taking old DBQ documents, etc. What I'm rambling at is these aren't available online. So the doc, because these questions have never appeared on a DBQ, but what he's done is he's taken documents from old DBQs, or he's taken like long essay questions that were asked previously, and then made them into DBQs, etc. So it's good stuff. It's just not stuff that can be researched, looked up, etc. And he's not publishing them online. He's emailing them to teachers that he's in contact with. So I've actually done that for a couple of your DBQs if you're curious where some of these have emerged from. So anyhow, looking at these, document 1 and 2 actually come from the same place, roughly speaking. They come from the debates over basically amending the state of New York Constitution. The first one, Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. Second one, from a lawyer and elected official. What you should have taken away from these, Justice Kent is fearful of extending the franchise. This is obviously an anti-suffrage or anti-democracy, if you want to take it that way, approach or stance, arguing that it is the tendency when the poor, when the vote is extended, the masses generally turn on the minority. The famed phrase, the tyranny of the majority. He almost uses it word for word, tyrannize over the minority. Um, but he talks about how they are going to try and change the rules. They will try and avoid their debts. They will try and take the wealth of the others, etc. And trample the minority. That virtuous, industrious minority, right? The wealthy, the well-to-do, the connected, the established, however you want to term it. Now, I don't know if I would, on this one, I guess you could. You could have pointed out he's the Chief Justice of the state Supreme Court. He's in this upper class. He already qualifies for the right to vote. His friends already qualify for the right to vote. It's probably in his best interest to not have the poorer classes vote, if you want to get real technical, because I mean he stands to gain nothing, right? He gains nothing from the right to vote being extended. He's already locked in, solid position in society. So you could have touched upon that. But this is the kind of person who has a vested interest in denying the extension of the franchise by virtue of his position and status in society. But again, can't just say, "Oh, he's a chief justice. He obviously hates suffrage." Why? Okay, if you just put he's chief justice, therefore he would hate it, you're not going to get credit. Right? You've got to relate. You got to tell me why it matters. Right? So if I was doing this one, that is maybe what I would have done if I use this document, to try and get that extra analysis point, perhaps. The next one is David Buell, who even calls out Justice Kent. This is one of those rare moments in a DBQ where we have two of them that actually play off each other. He talks about how, some people, like the aforementioned judge, believe that if we extend the right to vote, that property will be in danger, that the masses will tyrannize the minority, etc. But he argues that our government is not one rooted in property. It is a group of people who have come together and formed a partnership, and he argues that property is not the only right in our system. I don't know if you would like to take an attempt at trying to get outside bias or information on this one. And also, I'd really quickly point out, some of you are like, you haven't told me how this ties to a thesis. Well, it depends on what your thesis was, right? There's a lot of options. I'm just kind of giving you the quick, this is what it said, and this is what you could have brought up. This person, I guess you could point out the tone. He's clearly attacking. I wouldn't say attacking. He's clearly addressing, a previous document, and is obviously trying to rebuke it, to argue against it. He does hearken back to the framers, the Constitution. He hearkens to history. This is one of those ones where I don't feel like it comes off terribly strongly in any one direction. That's the thing when you do these documents. You got to look at them, and you've got to decide which ones you're going to play, right? It's up to you. But what I usually do is I look at them and I go, which ones can I use the most effectively, right, with my time? Which ones should I really hammer at? Which ones should I throw out there, see what I can get? This is one where I don't know what I would do necessarily. I mean, he's a lawyer and a public official, so I would assume he's already well-to-do, or connected, or has the franchise. But I don't know. Looking at that one, that's one I might not touch upon. I might not try and get that outside point, right? I might not think it'd be worth my time and effort. Let's look at the other ones. Document 3. I don't know who Margaret Bayard Smith is, but I know she's watching the inauguration of Andrew Jackson. She basically talks about the crowd and how people were so excited and everybody's all alive and everybody's calling him the people's president, the people would rule, a lot of talk about democracy. And then she comes back with basically a warning of fear, right? That basically popularly elected presidents can become tyrants, right? And that these are actually the most ferocious, cruel, and despotic of tyrants in all ages, right? The freely elected ones. So what I would do is use with this one the tone. That this is clearly a person watching the excitement of the crowd and how people were cheering. That the election of Andrew Jackson was the triumph of democracy, of the voice of the common man. But she's issuing a warning that common men can become dictators. Or that, just because he's popularly elected does not assure that he will be a good man or a just ruler, something along those lines. Now, you could point to tone. It doesn't clearly state if she supported him, if she voted for him, against him, any of that stuff. So I wouldn't go down that road. Some of you have done some of that stuff previously. I even mentioned that with the emancipation documents. There was that New York Tribune or whatever, the New York newspaper, and some of you were like, it's clearly an abolitionist newspaper. How do you know that? If you can't back it up, don't say it. So don't say she voted for John Quincy Adams and she's mad. Okay, you don't know that. But you could point to tone. You could point to purpose, right? She is saying this, or she was trying to convey her sense of fear that people who are putting too much faith in democracy. Or her tone clearly demonstrates, with her use of words. Now this is where quotes might be acceptable, where you could point out that she even stated that properly elected rulers could become the most, quote, ferocious, cruel, and despotic of them all. That word choice, that language choice clearly implies she is fearful and she thinks that this can go poorly. Document 4, Davy Crockett, right? American hero. Davy Crockett here is telling you how to get elected. He's telling you to drink, to win the common man vote. He said the upper class will look at you as a drunkard and a sloth. The lower class will vote for you. There's a lot of voter fraud. They sometimes vote twice, the lower classes. That's who you got to get. Do all you can to get advantage in the eyes of women. They don't vote, but they do bend the ear of their husbands, right? He talks about making promises you have no intention to keep. Promises cost nothing. Therefore, deny nobody who has a vote or sufficient influence to obtain one. That is, beyond the content. Again, you could look at tone. You could look at purpose. This almost reads as a guidebook. It's almost like he's trying to tell people how to win in this era of modern day mass politics or expanding franchise and democracy. So there are a number of ways you could have tried to get that extra analysis point with document 5. Now, document 2, or excuse me, document with document 4. Document 5, and one you could do, I would say too really quickly, Davy Crockett is speaking from experience somewhat. Davy Crockett was a frontiersman who did get elected to a few government offices. I don't want you to think that Davy Crockett, became like an upstanding member of the legislature, in the grand scheme of history. But you could mention that Davy Crockett did in fact get elected to office using some of these very tactics, right? So he could be speaking from experience. But again, you've got to say that. You can't just, Davy Crockett lived in these ages, or Davy Crockett was an American hero. He did get elected to the state of Tennessee, or to the House of Representatives for the state of Tennessee. Twice, actually. He served in 2 separate seats. So he spent a number of years there after his career as basically kind of a frontiersman. So you could point out he knows what he's talking about because he's used these very same tactics to get elected to Congress. Now, you could point out too, lastly, before I go on, this is one where if you know anything, Davy Crockett wasn't a fan of Andrew Jackson. So Davy Crockett could be using this as sort of advice or a guide for the Whig Party, right, or for Whig candidates. I don't know if you want to go down that road, but you could. It is possible. I mean, he was a member of the Whig Party at the end of his career. He was an outspoken anti-Jacksonian, so that's another option or potential. Last document, document 5, Charles Dickens. Yes, the famous English novelist Charles Dickens. Charles Dickens argues that the more we have democracy, the more Americans become distrusting of government officials. And interestingly enough, he kind of points it at it goes back to journalism, that once a person gets elected, they are constantly beguiled in the press. They're constantly attacked. And we're always questioning them and distrusting them because they get bombarded with this, because it's in the interest of the opponents. It's in the interest of other people to disgrace them, to replace them with themselves or their friends, right? So he does point out that American democracy quickly becomes just a game in a way, for lack of a better term. Now, you could point out that this might be, an Englishman who lacks experience with American politics. You could bring that up. But again, you can't just say he's English. He doesn't know, he's English. What does he know? You got to address it. You got to explain it. You could tie it to historical context, though. You could say that, in an era when America's, voting rights are expanding dramatically, and you get election of people like Andrew Jackson, who would not have, been elected in previous generations, etc. I mean, you could. There are ways to do it, right? I'm not telling you how to do it. I'm trying to show you the options you have and the way you have to look at this when you get these documents, right? Just chewing through them, I would try and address the tone and purpose of Davy Crockett. I would address the tone or purpose of Ms. Smith and her fear of popular democracy, and you could even kind of bounce them off one another, right? There's nothing saying you can't use documents at each other. You can't, document 3 highlights a concern or brings up this very issue that document 4 brought up, where people just go around getting votes to get elected and have no intention of doing their job. She's almost warning that. So I think I could get the outside analysis for Doc 3 and Doc 4. I don't know if I would for Doc 1 and 2. 1, though, does have you a ready-made one. The man has probably already got the right to vote and would not benefit from it being extended. It might only make his life a little more difficult. I don't know. So there you go. That's where you could get those outside analysis points. Again, even if you only want to do 3 documents instead of 5. What I will probably do is I will send you a sample essay. This guy writes sample essays with his documents as well. He actually writes you, some that get a decent score, some that get a poor score. I might send that and kind of put that out there, not as an assignment, but something that I would like you guys to look through and think about what you would give it, what gets points and what doesn't. Maybe I'll send up a follow up after that, where it's, here's what it would have scored, right? Here's what I think it would have scored. Here's what he thinks it would have scored, because we're kind of on par looking at it. Um, if you don't agree with some of this, you have questions, please email me. I'm more than willing to discuss. Like I said, I haven't graded anyone's essays. I haven't looked at anyone's essays, right? I just figured I wanted to get this on YouTube for you guys to start looking at, because we're now getting to the point where we're gonna have just a lot of me presenting videos or sending kind of information, and I need feedback from you guys as to whether you have questions, you understand, etc.